In the deep sea of metroidvanias, there are plenty of titles that get lost in the waves of the new releases. This is one of the titles that could easily fall by the wayside, especially with all the new games coming out this half of the year. But the question is, does it deserve it? I'm Sam the Ashen, and this is Crypt Custodian. Crypt Custodian is a 2D metroidvania that came out in August 2024, and while it has overwhelmingly positive ratings, it still hasn't broken 1,000 reviews, so it definitely hasn't hit the mainstream. This is usually a sign that the game has massive potential and just hasn't caught its break in the algorithm yet, or it already had its lucky break and hit its peak. I'm pretty optimistic about this game though, so I'm thinking it's the former. A great game that just hasn't broke through the mainstream wall yet. There's a good reason that the game has almost all good reviews, but maybe there's some reasons why it hasn't been a breakout hit yet too. One of the most important aspects of a Metroidvania is the combat. Fortunately, the combat in Crypt Custodian is pretty solid all around. Unfortunately, the combat doesn't really do anything new or innovative or even unique. I know it's risky for games to introduce crazy new mechanics in case it doesn't do well with fans, so settling for average in the combat department isn't really the worst thing in the world, but it leaves a lot to be desired. You only have one primary weapon throughout the game, and eventually you do get a secondary weapon, a boomerang, but I never really even used it. You can pretty much attack with your broom as quickly as you want, and if you use the boomerang, it kinda interrupts your moves. There aren't any combos in the game, and you just have your standard attack, until you unlock special attacks, which can range from a super sweep attack to a fireball barrage. The special attacks are pretty cool, and they add the much needed variety to the combat. You also have upgrades that you pick up throughout the world, which can range from spikes that spin around you, to a ghost that follows you around and picks up treasure from rubble piles you see along the way. If you've ever played Hollow Knight, it's similar to its charm systems, but the upgrades in Crypt Custodian feel more like roguelike upgrades, even though the game isn't a roguelike. The upgrade system isn't bad, it just didn't feel like anything special. While we're talking about the combat, how about the enemies? There are usually three major things I want to see in enemies: design, variety, and AI. The designs of the enemies are really well done. There's usually a theme to the enemies depending on what area you're in, and it's a nice touch. There's actually a pretty good amount of enemy variety as well. There's chicken creatures that pop out of pots, bells that stretch out their arms to clasp you in, caterpillars that only have a weak spot on their tail, and many more. A whole new group of enemies are introduced in every new area, so they did a great job with variety. The enemy AI is fine, nothing crazy, but nothing broken either. There's not a whole lot to say about it. Now for the boss fights, something that can often bring a game up to a whole new level or even knock it down a few pegs. Crypt Custodian has one major boss fight for each area, usually along with a major upgrade for your character. The boss fights have cool designs, they're challenging but still pretty beginner friendly and rewarding. They're also pretty unique, with each of them having completely different movesets from one another. Overall, they're done really well. Something else that's really important in a Metroidvania is exploration and level design. I can confidently say that this is where Crypt Custodian excels. Sorry I haven't mentioned this yet, but you play as a cat that has a happy life with its loving owners, but accidentally gets hit by a car. Once you get to the afterlife, you immediately hear a nice soothing lo-fi soundtrack that really fits the tone of the area and adds a lot to the atmosphere. You're greeted by a kind little cat that guides you to the clerk or judge of the afterlife. But before you get there, you find your trusty broom and you have to knock down some statues to continue. The judge says you're a great cat and is about to let you into the palace, or the good place, when she realizes you broke some of her statues to get there, so she immediately banishes you to the bad place. You're tasked with cleaning up the place as the custodian, so you immediately start breaking things and exploring. The art design in the game is absolutely beautiful, super relaxing at pretty much all times. It just oozes chillness. The big areas are broken up by many small areas that you clear out and try to push on, with plenty of branching paths to take and explore, whether it's towards the next area or to an optional reward, which is absolutely crucial to making exploration fun and rewarding. Having an incentive to explore an already beautiful place adds a lot to a game, and this game does it really well. As I mentioned before, you get new abilities after defeating bosses. For example, you get an air dash that lets you cross gaps that you couldn't before, so you can push on to new heights and go back to previous areas to get new places that you've never been to, which I always liked in games as long as it wasn't tedious. Luckily, I never felt like what I was doing was a chore when backtracking to use my new skill, partly because movement is pretty quick in this game if you want it to be, and also possibly because enemies don't respawn. I'm kinda mixed on this decision, but in this particular game, I don't think that it holds anything back. There's also a pretty big focus on the story, and while it isn't anything groundbreaking, it is a nice, relaxing experience with some added intrigue, with the leader being a little suspicious. There's some mysteries to figure out, and most of all, there's a lot of characters to meet that are all pretty charming. I don't think any of them were total standout characters, but they were a nice addition, and completing tasks for some of them, or rescuing them, and gaining their friendship was also a cool addition. The game makes it clear that if you manage to befriend all 10 side characters, then there's some additional content to go through. I won't spoil what it might be though. Overall, the exploration is definitely the game's strongest point, with a really relaxing atmosphere, great level design, rewarding optional paths, and it comes together to make a great time. At the end of the day, the game isn't going to break any barriers or change the gaming landscape, but it's a solid addition to Metroidvania titles all around, and probably a standout for a lot of people. At the $20 price tag, it's a fair asking price for the content that you get with it. If you enjoy Metroidvanias or relaxing exploration games, I would say it's worth giving Crypt Custodian a try. If you enjoyed the video, leaving a like really does help me out a lot. If you have any thoughts, share. I'd love to hear about it in the comments. If you want to see more from me, I post once every other Sunday, so I'll never clog up your feed. I hope you have a good one. Peace out.